Happy Friday and Happy New Year to all of you guys. Well, we are exactly 24 days away from the new TCPA one-to-one consent law goes into effect. So in 24 days, this new law goes into effect, and it's going to affect all of us, whether you're a final expense telephone agent or you're a face-to-face agent that calls your leads to set up appointments. And this training today is really just designed to help you guys that are new understand how this affects you, especially when you're buying leads. Once again, my name is Lauro Herrera, and I've been a life insurance agent since 2004 and a final expense telephone agent since 2011. And from 2022, I've been a TCPA D&C pro se litigator. So today, we're going to be diving into TCPA. So let's begin with a brief overview of the Telephone Consumer Protection Act, or TCPA as it's better known. TCPA was enacted in 1991. The TCPA was designed to shield consumers from unsolicited telemarketing calls and faxes. Over the years, it has evolved to encompass regulations around text messaging and automated calls, playing a critical role in protecting consumers' privacy. And it's true that none of us like unsolicited phone calls, being harassed every day. So today's focus, ladies and gentlemen, is on the new one-to-one consent requirement under TCPA. Now, this mandates explicit consent for each individual communication with the consumer. Unlike previous broad consents, business must now obtain specific permission for each interaction, ensuring greater consumer control over who contacts them and how. Now, I'll tell you this, up until now, for years, that consent was broad in the sense that if I was generating final expense leads from my landing page and I sell for Senior Life Insurance Company, I could sell those leads to any other agent out there. Doesn't matter if he worked for Senior Life or he didn't. As long as he was a final expense agent, he can call that person and attempt to sell them a final expense policy, because the consent was broad, allowing anyone to call them back as long it was related to the product or service that the person was asking for. But now, moving forward, each lead must have the exact consent of who is going to call specifically. So if you're working for an insurance agency and they're providing you leads, well, that consent that's on each and every single one of those leads is to that agency that you're authorized to work for and any of the insurance carriers that that agency offers. Or if you're running your own leads, your name of the products and services that you offer must be on that consent form, and it has to be very specific. So what are the key features of the new regulation? Let's explore the main aspects of the one-to-one consent. The explicit consent is now mandatory for all communication forms, whether calls or texts, manual or automated. Exceptions are few, like emergency calls or those with prior consent, but these are clearly outlined. And to give you guys an example, a situation where you have prior consent would be if it's a valid policyholder of yours. If it's a valid policyholder, then you can call them back because you have that consent. Now, how does this law that goes into effect in the next 24 days impact your sales strategy? Well, for telephone agents, as well as face-to-face agents that either call their leads to set appointments or have somebody else do the calling to set up the appointments, this regulation requires a new approach to managing and contacting leads. Ensuring proper consent for each call is now crucial. Non-compliance can lead to severe penalties, so it's vital to adapt your sales practices accordingly. I'll give you guys a couple examples here. If you're using a CRM system to call your leads, you need to make sure that one, that the consent gives you permission to call that lead back. Second, that your CRM system is tracking 90-day periods, because from the moment in time those people ask for the information, you have 90 days where you can contact them and you do not have to check the do not call registry. But moving forward, if any of those numbers is on the do not call registry, that's a violation. So think about it like this. One, you got to have the right consent before you even call that lead. And second, your CRM system, the technology you're using, needs to stop sending out text message automation after 90 days, because anything after 90 days will be a violation, because that consent only lasts 90 days. And why is this such a big deal? Think about it like this. There's approximately 330 million Americans. That's the population in the US. And according to this statistic from 2022, there was 246 million people registered on the National Do Not Call Registry. And that don't include the 12 states that have their own specific state Do Not Call Registry. So again, this regulation requires you that you're managing every single one of these leads the right way, or else you can find yourself in a violation. And again, these violations, ladies and gentlemen, are expensive. A DNC violations could be upwards of $50,000 per violation. A TCPA violation ranges from $500 upwards of $1,500 if they can prove that you were negligent. So what are the risks associated with buying leads? Using purchased leads from different insurance brokers and selling for another can be particularly risky under the new regulation. Without verified consent, you can face legal challenges and hefty fines. So it's essential to ensure that each lead has given explicit consent or contact, or your business could be at significant risk. You know, for years, for a lot of you guys that are brokers, this was not a problem, but now it is. If currently you have, let's say, two final expense carriers with broker A, and you have two other final expense carriers with broker B, and insurance broker B sells you leads, well, you can only represent the product and services that that agency B had on their consent form. Before, it didn't matter. If broker A provided me leads, I could sell broker B's insurance carrier, and it wasn't an issue because it was still final expense. moving forward, this is now very specific, and you can no longer do that. For my agency, what we've decided to do is we've just decided to have only one carrier relationship, a good final expense carrier, and all of our marketing aligns with one carrier. So there is never any issue with if the carriers that I have were properly on that consent form. Again, products and services. And it brings me back again to preparing for this compliance. How can you ensure compliance? Start by upgrading your consent management systems to precisely track and verify consents. Training is essential for all staff to understand the new procedures. Reviewing and updating existing consent agreements will also be necessary. So if you've been working with a lead vendor for years, now it's necessary for you to make sure with your own eyes, your own ears, that each and every single one of the advertisements that you're running or you're buying leads from have your specific information of the products and services that you offer. Or if you're buying leads from an agency, you need to make sure that you have the authority to represent that agency. And also, you need to make sure that you don't offer anything outside of the consent that was given. And one factor, again, for a lot of you guys that are new, the importance of knowing when the lead was generated, the exact date, is because we only have a 90-day window where we can contact these people from the moment in time they contacted our ad. If you notice here on the right, in the website, the FTC, under question 10, how does the established business relationship provision work for a consumer whose number's on the registry? Well, first, if they're a paying client, policyholder, 18 months. So you can contact that person as long as they're making payments, they're a valid client, you can contact them. So if their phone number's on the DNC, does not matter. But if you notice here, if a consumer makes an inquiry or submits an application to a company, the company can call for 3 months. After 3 months, on day 91, you need to make sure that yourself as the agent or any of your sub-agents, that if they call, they no longer are using an automatic dialing system, text messaging, robo-dialing, because that consent has expired to use any of those devices. But moving forward on day 91, as long as you check that that phone number is not on the National Do Not Call Registry, you can go ahead and manually call that person to talk to them about final expense. And anytime you call that person, you need to check that phone number to make sure they're not on no state or no national DNC. And guys, like I mentioned to you, I am a pro se litigator since 2022. In 2022, I made $8,000 within 48 hours settling with an agency that was calling me unsolicited on my cell phone. And since then, in 2024, I settled over 6 figures with over 5 settlements from 5 different agencies, ranging from insurance to law firms, you name it, of people just cold calling me, soliciting without my prior written consent. And let me tell you what, as a pro se litigator, all of these have all settled with me. Not one of these agencies has disputed or attempted to fight these allegations simply because I had the proof that I've been on the National Do Not Call Registry for over 2 years, and it's very hard to deny. And if you notice here on the right, not only do you need to make sure that you're following your TCPA and DNC guidelines, but also the advertising that you are buying, that you're approving, you need to make sure that they're not misleading. You see there's a lot of agencies, big names out there being sued. The government's involved because of the misleading types of advertising that is very common. So you need to be sure what the advertisement looks like, when the lead was generated, and make sure that your consent, your name, your product, your service is on that consent form. So the key takeaways, in summary, the TCPA one-to-one consent regulation marks a significant shift in client communication. It underscores the importance of explicit consent, benefiting clients with increased privacy and requiring agents to adapt their sales practices. Compliance is a legal necessity and a chance to build trust. So guys, this is a good thing because it's going to ensure that all of you are working quality leads, and it helps the consumer eliminate a lot of the unsolicited phone calls that have been a problem for so many people, including yourself. You're probably asking yourself, you know, when was the last time you had an unsolicited call? And it's very common. Now, again, guys, I hope this information helped you. If you guys would like, if you have any other questions, any doubts, please feel free to reach out to me on my website, finalexpensetelesalespro.com, and I'd be more than happy to answer any question. But this law goes into effect in 24 days, and it is your responsibility to make sure that you know how this law affects you every time you pick up the phone to call those leads. So with that said, I hope you guys have a great 2025, and you guys be blessed. Bye-bye.